Thank you very much, Janelle. And good morning, and I'm really happy to be here and to talk with you about our research and study of how did we achieve such a high level mark for us when it comes to graduation rate. So what we're going to do is we're going to take somewhat of a deeper dive into data, okay, and show you through a comparative analysis of the 2009 cohort of first-time freshmen and compared to 2003 cohort. So let me talk to you about what we're doing. The CSU Graduation Initiative, which began in 2009, and we just completed it this fall, 2015. The purpose of that system-wide project was to raise the overall achievement of CSU graduates and attempt to close the achievement gap. The Chancellor's Office launched this initiative in fall of 2009. It's for all the system, 23 campuses. The initiative was expected. What we wanted to do system-wide was to raise the 6-year graduation rate by 8 percentage points, and to do that by 2015. So that was to increase from 46% to 54%. In addition to that, it was to cut in half the gap between underrepresented minority students and others. Correspondingly, Fresno State launched its graduation initiative that by 2015 raised the 6-year graduation rate for first-time, full-time freshmen by 6 percentage points. That was to bring us from a 48% graduation rate to 54%, and also to cut in half that gap between underrepresented minorities and others. So here's what it looks like when we put it in the chart, the results. So we can see the trend up, reaching a high mark of 58.4%, closing the gap, cutting it in half from a little bit more than 10 percentage point gap down to about a 5 percentage point gap. We still have work to do, but moving all in the right and intended direction. So let me tell you the model. This is what we're trying to do here as we dive in deeply to understand how did we do it? Real general question. How did it happen that the fall 2009 cohort achieved the highest graduation rate in Fresno State history? To do this analysis, we selected the 2003 first-time freshman cohort to compare that with our 2009 cohort. Roughly the same size of group, just a bit under 2,500 students for the 2003 cohort, and just a bit more than 2,600 students for the 2009 cohort. We tracked the performance of these groups over 6 years, looking at the historical patterns of enrollment and performance at Fresno State. 6 years, 12 terms. This is the conceptual framework that includes the categories, the dimensions of various variables, factors, elements, okay? So, cohort quality, cohort characteristics between these two groups. I'm going to toggle back and forth. We're going to forget about this side. This is just a tracking sheet for our analysis model. But each of those categories. The first one, cohort quality. We looked at the demographics of these groups, the academic preparation of these groups. We looked at an enrollment, those who stopped out or continued in being enrolled term by term, the percentage enrolled, those who stopped out, the percentage, term units enrolled, full-time status. We looked at term performance as measured by their term GPA, term units earned, and so on. Major status, the matter regarding declared, undeclared majors, change in majors, those who are double majors, minors, even majoring in STEM. Compared these factors. We looked at overall the academic progress, cumulative units earned, end of term, GPA, and this idea also of, we call it on tracking. Did they stay on track to become sophomores when they're supposed to, juniors when they're supposed to, seniors, and so on? That's the conceptual model. Then we look at the effect, the impact of these measures, items, on the six-year graduation rate. So that's the model. What I want to take you into is look at, we're diving into the Tableau dashboard that the university has, that OIE manages, and we're going to look at results and compare these two cohorts. It's going to take a minute for the system to log in. I know we're on Wi-Fi, but we'll get there. Okay. So, here's where I want to tell the story. Here's where the story becomes interesting. Cohort quality, we call it, the characteristics of the cohorts as they come in to the university. Let's compare the 2003 and the 2009. Throughout this, the orange color is the 2009 cohort, okay? So how do they compare in terms of characteristics coming in? Well, if we look at the measure of by gender, pretty much about the same. Female, 60%, slightly above. Pell eligibility, all right, so as a proxy measure of low income, Pell status. The 2009 cohort, slightly greater proportion that are Pell students compared to 2003. FGS, that's first generation status. The fall 2009 cohort, slightly more in terms of first generation status. By the way, just a footnote, this is 2009. You know, today, first generation status students, about 70%, a little bit more than 70%. URM, underrepresented minority students. Here's where a big change, difference. The 2003 cohort, about 37%, and slightly more than 43% for the 2009 cohort. Big change. So if we break this out over here, ethnicity, we can see some groups pretty much remain close to the same. However, here is the big change. White non-Hispanic student, 2003, was just about 37%, down to, for 2009 cohort, 29.8, so roughly 30%. Hispanic, Latino, that increased from 28.5% to 35.8%. Big shift there. Academic preparation, so high school GPA coming in. The 2009 cohort, slightly lower high school GPA as a group coming in. SAT scores, the 2009, slightly lower SAT score coming in. English math remediation, it's another variable set of factors we looked at. The big change is in the increase in those requiring both English and math remediation. Nearly 44% for the 2009, up from about 28% for the 2003 cohort. We also looked at pre-collegiate experience, remained about the same, about 22%, slightly more than that. So looking at the conditions, the characteristics of these two different groups, there was no overlap. The 2003 cohort 6-year graduation rate calculated and ended in 2009. Then begins the 2009 graduation initiative system-wide, and that ends in 2015. All right? So there's no overlap. The thought here, by looking at all these demographic characteristics and preparation characteristics, is that the 2009 cohort appears more challenging to the institution in terms of what the university needs to do to reach in, reach out, and work with a population, a group that is much more diverse and seems much more in need of help, assistance, or interventions. To keep them on track, keep them here, all right? So, the facts comparing these two groups is that the 2009 cohort evidenced and shows a higher graduation rate. And at each term, we see the terms down here where we track them, all right? About the 8th term, or that would be around the fourth, that's the 4th year, the 8th term, that's where the graduation rates and those who complete tends to be greater for the 2009 cohort. And each term after the 8th term, each term, the 2009 cohort, there are more graduating in that term and during that year. Well, let's look some more. Enrolled. Tracking the percentage enrolled. And another way of looking at this is retention. So the 2009 cohort, throughout the 12 terms, and especially look at the middle terms, a higher rate of retention or staying enrolled, being enrolled. And with more of the 2009 cohort, more of them being enrolled in 8 or more terms. Here is where we looked at the data, and I just did this. I go, interesting. Scratch my head a little bit, look at my team, and go, okay, what? Am I seeing this right? Okay, so it's the 2003 cohort that's actually enrolled in more term units, enrolled in units at a greater level than the 2003, the 2009. So the 2003 cohort was enrolled in more units on average than the 2009 cohort. However, below, we see that more 2009 students enrolled as full-time students right around the middle of the term. So there were more of them enrolled full-time. All right? Now look. The 2009 cohort students enrolled in less units on average, but what we find is they earned more. They earned more of those units compared to the 2003 cohort. So the ratio of earned to enrolled is higher, much higher, and consistently so for the 2009 cohort. We find that the 2009 cohort earned a higher term GPA. Their GPA was better on average after the first term compared to 2003. In terms of academic standing after the first term, the 2009 cohort maintained a greater pattern and percentage of those in good academic standing. More 2009 students declared a major across terms. So the other way of looking at this, the pattern is there were more undeclared majors across the terms for the 2003 compared to the 2009 cohort. And it looks, what we find is that within those first 2 years, the 2009 cohort, more of them would change majors during those first 2 years and then settle down. So it seems we took care of that change major pattern and behavior within those first 2 years for the 2009 compared to the 2003 cohort. Double majors, minors, the top chart, the 2009 cohort, there were more who were double majors and minors. The bottom chart, there were more in the 2009 cohort who were STEM majors, STEM students. Cumulative GPA, the 2009 group, better, and maintained a higher cumulative GPA across, as well as accumulated more units than the 2003 cohort throughout this experience and time frame. On tracking, I mentioned on tracking. Well, this shows the pattern that the '09 students were on track more than the '03 group. And when the cohort was to be a sophomore by that second year, when they're supposed to be sophomores, a greater proportion were sophomores. That's that peak. When they're supposed to be juniors, a greater proportion are juniors. When they're to be seniors, a greater proportion are seniors. Now, I know it continues there, so we have fifth-year seniors and sixth-year seniors. That's a different study, super seniors. That's a different project, something we are working on and attending to bring super seniors to finish earlier, okay? But the pattern pretty much shows that the '09 cohort stayed pretty much on track, or better, on track when they were supposed to be on that track. So let me go back to my I am not going to walk us through all these weeds. All right? I'm nice about that. All right? But this is just to show you the modeling that our senior research analyst, Mr. Hong Tao Yu, did this study for us, analysis for us, led it with our team. All I want to show is that the highlighted areas in the model, taking into account all those factors that I demonstrated and reviewed with you, is that the important explanatory factors on the difference between '09 and the '03 cohort were things like total number of enrolled terms. The red are the most powerful explanatory. Term units earned, term GPA, number of full terms after the first terms, term units enrolled. Here's where I want to take us now and talk about, well, what does this mean? Okay. The '09 cohort, as we saw, was much more diverse, and in terms of the group's characteristics and profile, the evidence shows that there are more challenges with the '09 cohort compared to the '03. More challenges, all right? Yet, this group, this population, arrived here in Fresno State, but the result was that achieved with this group a much higher, a significantly higher graduation rate of 58%. What made that difference? What I propose and what we believe is we're talking now about the institution's effect. It was the institution's energy and the resources, including collaboration that we did, pulled together, in reaching out, intervening, building programs to support this type of success. And you know what? That's what it takes, all right? So what I see, and we all appreciate, we talk about this all the time in academic affairs leadership team, including in meetings with student affairs, that the institution, Fresno State, and this is across the system, it's not just Fresno State, we are all doing this. The institution has to look at how it can change what it does to fit what the needs are of the populations coming in. We're no longer in that era where we just, we have our structure, we have our services, and we just wait for students to come in and they see us, they work with us, and go on. No, what we have to do is adjust and meet the needs of students that are coming to Fresno State. It's changing. The demographics are changing, the needs are changing. We all know how diverse the central San Joaquin Valley population of students is and is becoming. The other day, I was looking at the future. And I was looking at the future by looking at data. And the data I was looking at was the data kindergartners today. Kindergartners in the 8 counties of the San Joaquin Valley. Look at that to get a glimpse of the population. We get 80%, about 80% of our students from the San Joaquin Valley. Okay? Kindergartners, close to 70% Hispanic Latino, large and growing number of Asian groups, and particularly a large growing number of Hmong and Southeast Asian children. I didn't look at the languages that are spoken, but for the San Joaquin Valley, but there are easily more than 100 different language groups in the San Joaquin Valley spoken in the public schools. All right? Very diverse population group that's coming, and that's the future. So what the data tell us is that we have to continue to look at where we may structure and improve the interventions that we do for our students. And here's a chart. It doesn't have everything. Okay? This chart just shows a selection, but there are many more things that are going on here that would be important for us to document and to analyze. And we're working with academic affairs and student affairs, especially the assessment teams, to understand what the programs are, what they are doing, and what effect does it have on keeping students in the pipeline, keeping them on track. Okay? Something new that's changed here, which I think is a very good thing, is the advising structure, so that we are moving from a centralized type of an advising culture and environment, moving it out decentrally in coordination with advising centers at the colleges. All right? So that is an example of the institution changing to go and be and just where students are, meeting our students. One thing that we do know from the research and just from experience, first-generation students, by definition, come from homes where there is no college degree, a lack of college going culture in the home, yet we have 70%. So you meet a lot of students. How many of you are first generation, by the way? Look at that, okay? We meet students all the time, first generation students. And we engage, as we talk with them, are you the first in your family? Yes, I am. Well, how does your mom and your dad, how do they feel about you being in college and doing this? They feel really great. Do they help you? Well, they encourage me. They encourage, but really, when it comes to understanding, and this is the students saying this, but to really understanding how to get through and how to work this bureaucracy, no, we really learn it from peers, we learn it from advising, we learn it from orientation, we learn it here. Well, that's the future. There's more of that. So while this is just a snapshot, we have programs for students when they first arrive or are arriving, EOP Summer Bridge. By the way, EOP Summer Bridge and analyzing that program and the impact, the graduation rate of the 2009 cohort for EOP Summer Bridge was even greater than the 58% of the university-wide. I think it was close to 61 or 62%. So that's really impacting and making a difference. We have other yes. There are first-year experience programs, okay? These that are in the yellow-orange are mandatory types of interventions. Academic success courses, students that we find are in academic trouble, or bringing them in, keeping them in the pipeline, working with them. Their second semester advising, mandatory selection of a major by the 60th unit, academic advising by the 75th unit. Other activities, we are continuously looking at and identifying at-risk students that are at risk. And we do something with these, bringing them in to advising and to programs that can intervene and help. I mentioned super seniors, those with 120 units. That's another project. We're working on that. So the story is that the 2009 cohort achieved this great success of 58+%, but it was what the university also did in reaching out and making an impact. And the other message is, you know, we learned a lot, and we're going to continue to learn more. One of the things that we learned that is very important is to maintain this level of collaboration and cooperation across academic affairs and student affairs. That's one. The other thing is evidence. We need to look at the data. We need to continue to assess programs and program impact. Another thing that we learn and is reaching out and continuing to work with our feeder institutions in building those relationships and learn from each other. A side note is my office is working with the Student Affairs Office, University Outreach Services, and Student Recruitment Center. As most of you may know, we've developed a data visualization dashboard that we serve the university with. But we are also developed a dashboard for high schools. We're going through the process at this time on data agreements and making sure all is following data security. But the idea is to provide to high schools through the Office University of Outreach Services to provide to the high schools dashboard access so that they may see their students as they enter and go through and experience Fresno State. So that's important feedback that the local high schools will get and receive in understanding what does it take, what might they at their home institution look at to adjust to further prepare their students who are coming from Fresno High or Bullard or others to Fresno State. That's one thing that does. The other thing that it does is it brings us to talk together. It brings us to interact. It brings those from the high schools and those at Fresno State to work together and to collaborate, to idea share, and to build a stronger and strengthen that relationship. That's what it's going to take. So not only is it important here that we maintain good, strong relationships as we work together for student success, but also our environment outside of us. So, how am I doing for time? I have 3 minutes? I mean, 40 minutes just went like that? Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. I will stop right here, and if there's any, do I have 3 minutes for questions or anything like that? Okay.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. You may have the data in this presentation, we may not have gotten to it, but Dr. O'Donnell mentioned that when we're looking at data and its effectiveness, for whom and when. And so I'm just wondering if you all have analyzed the student outcomes based on race and ethnicity, and how do those bear out?
We have a lot of data, yes, and we can get very granular by gender, race, ethnicity, and even down to the major of the student. We can look at those who are native students, first-time freshmen, as well as transfers. And depending on the research question, what is the question? Yes, we can navigate. Now, most of this, and we're always building it, the dashboard, data visualization system that we've built two. One is internal, the data dashboard, internal for staff that have access rights into the data to get all the way down to a student record, if that's what it takes. And then we have a public dashboard that also has aggregate information to answer a lot of those questions. So, quick answer, yes, we do have the data, okay? Are you a campus person? Well, okay, now you know me. You can come and knock on my door, come and see me. We can have great conversation. Anyone else?
Angel, I like the comment that you made in terms of working vertically with the high schools, and I'm wondering if anything is being done in order to look at the early assessment program, which is an exam that kind of shows the student whether they're college ready at the 7th and 11th grade. And maybe that's a solution that we can use in order to remediate these students early before they actually enter Fresno State.
We haven't used that data. We are aware of it, and it's a good question. And we're open to working with others and collaborating on various data sources to help inform us. I'll tell you that one of the huge data projects that we have taken on right now is the California Department of Education's K-12 data set. Okay, that's millions of records. And we are prototyping it. We're looking at preparation in terms of high schools and their A through G subjects and AP classes. And the idea there is we already know high schools are different in terms of what they have from teachers and curriculum and preparing students for university. So we're taking that one on. Happy to have a conversation with you about your question. Great. Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much.